The espresso machine was already hissing like a pissed-off cat when I walked into the break room at 7:04 a.m., 10 minutes earlier than usual because Mondays are clingy little bastards. They show up uninvited and expect miracles. My phone buzzed with 3 Slack pings before I even found a clean mug. Vendor portals down, 1 read. Client flagged the Q3 reconciliation, said another. The third, my favorite, printers jammed again. That last one wasn't even my department, but somehow, if it beeped, crashed, blinked red, or gave someone a digital paper cut, it found its way to me. Mary, the unofficial patron saint of corporate breakdowns. I sipped my coffee, burnt as hell, same as always, and headed straight into my corner of organized chaos. The kind only someone like me could love. I'd been operations director for over 12 years. I knew where every fuse box, system override, and vendor skeleton was buried. I didn't just keep things running, I was the engine. If a client payment bounced, I could trace the glitch in under 10 minutes. If compliance raised a flag, I had the audit trail ready before they hit send. Nobody praised it, of course. This wasn't the kind of work that got standing ovations or glossy slides at all-hands meetings. It was the kind of work that kept the lights on and the lawsuits away. And that was fine by me. I wasn't here for applause. I was here because I was damn good at what I did. Because this company worked barely, chaotically, but consistently because I made sure it did. So when my inbox pinged at 8:27 with a document titled Ops Authority Handoff Draft 1, I assumed it was some intern's misrouted attachment. Until I opened it. No greeting. No explanation. Just a one-pager with my name, the words handover timeline, and a blank line where my signature was supposed to go. No name on the from field, no contact for follow-up. It was like the document had spawned from a corporate Ouija board. And here's the kicker, it referenced systems access I hadn't even authorized for myself yet. I flagged it, added a sticky note, missing context, no sender info, not signing, and dropped it into my follow-up folder. And I went back to my actual crises. A botched vendor address that rerouted $84,000 worth of materials to a shuttered warehouse in Topeka, and a compliance report that someone tried to submit in Google Sheets like we were running a Girl Scout cookie drive. Typical Monday. Listen, while we're knee-deep in this train wreck, tale of boardroom buffoonery, do me a quick favor. If you're enjoying this so far, hit that like button and subscribe. I know 90% of you just lurk like corporate phantoms during Zoom calls, but it really helps the team keep these stories coming. We work hard. Like cleaning up HR's forgotten NDAs during a merger hard. Anyway, by lunch, I'd resolved most of the morning's fires, minus the printer jam, which, spoiler alert, was caused by someone trying to laminate a sandwich. I even had time to knock out 2 ops review drafts and clear out some vendor backlog from last quarter. I thrive in the chaos. I am the chaos, but with a filing system. So when my assistant popped in and said, Mary, the founder's back, he wants to join the 2 p.m. ops sync, I blinked once. The founder, I asked, half thinking she meant some LinkedIn rando with a mustache and a dream. Yep, Ken, back from medical leave. He said he has some exciting structural updates. Of course he does, I muttered, tossing my glasses onto the desk. Ken hadn't been around in nearly a year. Rumor was a stroke, or burnout, or something involving a silent retreat and fermented goat milk. Nobody knew for sure. But the company had done fine without him. I had kept it together without him, and I had a very bad feeling that whatever exciting structural update he was about to unveil wasn't going to involve my bonus getting uncapped. Still, I adjusted my blazer, touched up my lipstick like armor, and walked into that 2 p.m. meeting with my notepad, my poker face, and a sinking sensation that Monday had just pulled out a chainsaw. I wasn't wrong. The room smelled like dry erase fumes and burnt hope. Operations Sync every Tuesday at 2 p.m. usually meant budget updates, systems bottlenecks, and me politely reminding Chad from procurement that urgent does not mean forgot your deadline until this morning. Everyone was already half tuned out, sipping La Croix and pretending to care. Then the door opened. Ken strolled in like he hadn't ghosted the company for the better part of a year. He looked thinner, grayer, like a man who'd seen some things, probably a vision board and a goat yoga instructor named Celeste. But his grin was too wide. It wasn't relief. It was anticipation. Behind him trailed a guy who looked like he'd just lost a TikTok boxing match. Mismatched socks, overpriced sneakers, hair that probably cost more than my car's battery. He was scrolling on his phone while walking, strike one. Ken clapped his hands once. Team, I want to introduce someone very special. This is my son, Spencer. He's going to be shadowing Mary for a few weeks. Eventually, he'll take over her duties. My ears rang. Just a low, slow buzz like a fuse blowing in a silent room. Nobody moved. Janice blinked too hard. Doug choked on his mint. Spencer didn't look up from his phone. I didn't say a word. No gasp, no sarcasm, no slow clap or dramatic meltdown. I reached into my bag, pulled out my badge, my keys, and my external access fob, each one like a scalpel from a surgeon's tray, and slid them across the table. Clink, clack, done. Then I stood up, smoothed my blazer, and walked out. Behind me, someone whispered, "Wait, was that it?" That was it. You want my kingdom? Here. Just don't come crying when it collapses under the weight of your son's LinkedIn hustle and gluten-free entitlement. I walked straight to my office, locked the door, and took a deep breath. Not because I was overwhelmed, because I wasn't. I was prepared, not for this exactly, but for something. We don't work ops for 12 years without keeping receipts. Not just metaphorical ones. Literal ones, email chains, access logs, clause triggers, system design notes. You build your fortress silently, brick by invisible brick, and wait. 5 minutes later, a Teams ping lit up on my screen. HR. Subject, offboarding process, next step, smiling face with smiling eyes, body. Hi, Mary. So sorry to see you go. Attached is the offboarding checklist. Please return all devices and files by EOD Friday. Let us know if you have questions. Thanks again for your contributions and best of luck. I stared at it for a beat. The audacity of a smiley face in a digital death note. I clicked reply, typed slowly, deliberately. Thank you. Kindly forward this thread to legal. My formal counsel will respond shortly. Hit send. Then I opened a fresh folder on my desktop. Labeled it Succession. Because let me tell you something about companies like ours. They survive not on vision, but on continuity. And continuity lives in access. In permissions. In knowledge no Google Doc can replicate. The kind of knowledge you don't hand over in a coffee chat with a man-child whose greatest professional achievement was moderator of r/stonks. By 4 p.m., Spencer had already locked himself out of the internal finance dashboard. By 4:15, he'd requested a password reset on a system that didn't use passwords. At 4:23, he emailed IT asking where the backend folders live. I sat quietly in my chair, sipping cold coffee, watching the empire tilt. The founder, he didn't follow up. No call, no email, not even a thumbs-up emoji. And that told me everything I needed to know. They thought I would rage, plead, bargain. They didn't understand the math. I'd already taken everything of value with me. It was never the keys. It was the knowledge that no one else even knew they needed. Spencer showed up Wednesday morning in a hoodie that said built different across the chest, which, yeah, I agreed with, just not the way he meant. He bounced into the operations bullpen like he was about to drop an NFT white paper, smacking a Red Bull on the conference table, and calling an all-hands powwow that no one had time for. You could smell the Silicon Valley cosplay off him, like Axe body spray and misplaced confidence. First order of business, payroll, which he announced cheerily he'd be streamlining. Now, to be clear, payroll is not something you streamline unless you enjoy getting your legal department subpoenaed. It's a delicate balance of scheduled disbursements, IRS filings, auto withholdings, state-specific compliance triggers, and quarterly audits. Runs through a system I helped design during the 2016 merger, a system that requires dual auth verification and sequential vendor lock releases. Not sexy, but it works. Spencer, bless his startup scrambled heart, skipped all that. At 9:43 a.m., he sent out a company-wide email saying payroll would be issued via a new platform by Friday for increased agility. By 11:12, Treasury flagged his import attempt as a security risk. The vendor froze our remittance profile. Employees stopped getting notifications. One manager replied, "Is this a phishing scam or are we just dying slowly?" By noon, Spencer sent me an email. Subject, quick favor, grinning face with sweat body. Hey Mary, what's your login for the payroll ops dashboard? Can't seem to access it and IT is being weird. Just need it real quick. Thanks. I stared at it for a solid 5 minutes, sipping lukewarm coffee and feeling the distinct satisfaction of watching a man try to fix a watch with a hammer. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my Succession folder, started adding subfolders. One for vendor gatekeeping protocols, another for Clause 7.3 references, and one just labeled receipts because every woman in corporate knows what it means to keep the paper trail holy. At 2:14 p.m., Spencer tried again. This time CCing HR, IT, and the founder. Mary, please respond. We're trying to implement new processes and your silence is actively harming the transition. I took a screenshot, saved it under gaslighting attempts. No reply. By Thursday, things escalated. The export controls system flagged an outbound invoice as non-compliant. Turns out, Spencer had bypassed the system we used to filter for country-specific sanctions. The file he approved nearly triggered a federal alert. Treasury went full DEFCON. Compliance pinged legal. One brave soul from accounting tried to reverse the submission but found themselves locked out because, in his infinite wisdom, Spencer had reassigned internal permissions using his personal Gmail as admin. At this point, people weren't even hiding their panic. Slack channels were full of cryptic "Has anyone heard from Mary?" messages. Vendors started replying with, "Please confirm if this is a legitimate request." Your previous handler, Mary, had different credentials. One even attached an old email from me, highlighting the stark difference in tone and grammar. The thing about legacy systems is that they're like old dogs. Loyal, but they only respond to the voice they trust. Spencer barked and they just lay down and stared at him like he was a Roomba trying to speak Latin. Thursday night, I poured myself a whiskey and reviewed my receipts. Emails, sign-off chains, back-end logs. Spencer had tried to reroute processes without initiating any formal change of guard protocol. No board ratification. No dual auth confirmations, no documentation. The system was built to default to no one confused. And Spencer? Spencer was confusion incarnate. I wasn't sabotaging anything. Let's be very clear. I hadn't lifted a finger to break a damn thing. I'd simply stopped holding it all together, and that was enough. I sent one email that night, just one to myself, with attachments. Subject, timeline initial disruption, no revenge. No emotion, just timestamp truth, because I didn't need to raise my voice to burn the house down. All I had to do was let the boy try to run it. By Monday, the word hiccup had been used in 6 emails, 3 meetings, and one internal memo from Spencer titled Transition Clarity and Optimism. I'd seen toddlers throw less delusional tantrums in a Chuck E. Cheese ball pit, but sure, let's call it a hiccup. The coup, Alan wasn't convinced. He'd been quiet through most of this, watching from the sidelines like someone observing a controlled burn and hoping it didn't reach the shed full of fireworks. But now, his inbox was flooding. Vendors frozen mid-shipment. Treasury flagged 3 internal transfers. One invoice for $126,000 had been duplicated and paid twice, because Spencer mistook reconciliation pending for let's just YOLO this thing. Meanwhile, I was sitting at a corner table in a downtown cafe, decaf Americano in hand, laptop open, earbuds in, expression neutral. The kind of neutral that makes people nervous. The kind that says, I know more than I'm saying and I'm waiting to see who breaks first, because silence is a weapon, and mine was fully loaded. Back at HQ, word was spreading, not loudly, not in gossip circles. No, this was the kind of anxiety that crept in through calendar cancellations and ambiguous "can we chat?" messages. A few department heads started BCCing each other on emails. Someone even reopened the ancient disaster recovery protocol doc, which hadn't been touched since the 2020 Zoom server meltdown, and flagged sections that referenced unauthorized systems access. Spencer, still smiling, still tweeting inspirational nonsense like leadership is learned, not earned, flexed biceps #grind set. He called an impromptu alignment huddle with the ops team that afternoon and opened with, guys, I know change is hard. But let's not overthink it, just make it work. Just make it work. I could practically hear the collective eye twitch from across the city. Alan finally stepped in. He requested a private meeting with the founder and Spencer. The logs would later show it lasted exactly 47 minutes. The founder defended his son. He's learning, it's messy, but he's capable. Spencer blamed legacy tools for the errors and asked if they could rip out the compliance triggers and replace them with a simpler API. Alan said one thing before leaving the room. Mary built those triggers. If they're failing, it's because someone's bypassing them. At 6:34 p.m., opened the memo I'd been quietly compiling for 2 weeks. It was already 28 pages long. Clean, coded, every page backed by data, timelines, and audit trails. I added one more line just beneath the section labeled Succession Authorization Chain. Clause 7.3. Transfer of operational custody requires formal board ratification and countersignature by incumbent director. Neither occurred. No need for threats. No need to send it yet. Just documenting. Because if you've ever watched a freight train come off its rails in slow motion, you know the most haunting part isn't the crash. It's the silence just before, when everyone realizes the brakes aren't working, and the conductor is still bragging about his Spotify playlist. Meanwhile, internal emails kept getting weirder. One from the logistics team, Vendor 845 is withholding shipment due to failure to comply with the EU subvendor clause. Who signed off on this? Another from compliance, escalation pending from Treasury, possible federal exposure. And my personal favorite from IT, Spencer has requested superadmin credentials again. We've declined per protocol. Back in the cafe, I closed my laptop and took a slow sip of my coffee. Bitter. Like the irony of watching your replacement sink the ship you spent a decade patching from below deck with duct tape and sheer willpower. They still hadn't asked for my help, but they were starting to realize something was missing. Something no title could replace. Something Spencer didn't even know to look for. And when they did finally ask, they'd discover it wasn't gone. It had just gone quiet. Friday morning arrived like a middle finger in calendar form. Breach hit at 8:12 a.m. A routine file transfer, quarterly vendor reconciliation, nothing explosive had gone out without encryption. No masking, no secure channel. Just hundreds of rows of confidential data, tax IDs, payment terms, contract tiers, shot off into the digital void via an unsecured export and a poorly CC'd email chain. The recipient? A third-party logistics firm not on our approved vendor list. The subject line. FWD, for Spencer's FYI, that smiley face might as well have been a stick of dynamite. Legal caught wind by 8:57. Treasury followed at 9:13. By 9:45, an emergency meeting had been scheduled. Critical alignment call, they called it in the calendar invite. That's lawyer speak for, someone's getting flayed today, and it won't be quietly. Spencer, meanwhile, tried to play it cool. He showed up to the boardroom in a zip-up hoodie that looked suspiciously like it hadn't been washed since Tuesday and said the words. It's not a big deal, it was just a CSV. Just a CSV. I wasn't in that room, but I knew the tone. I knew the rising pitch in Legal's voice. I knew how Alan's nostrils flared when he was 2 seconds from flipping the entire table. And I knew the exact moment Spencer realized he'd wandered into a knife fight with a juice box in hand. The founder, still committed to the illusion, tried to smooth it over. I authorized the vendor visibility update, he said, voice tight. There was a pause, the kind of pause that makes skin itch. Then Legal replied, cool and crisp, authorized by whom on record? Not theoretically, not paternally, on paper. The room fell silent, because no matter how many trust falls or inspirational whiteboard sessions Spencer held, there were no signatures, no recorded access grants, no board ratification, no compliance clearance. Just a 28-year-old with admin credentials he shouldn't have, and a track record that now included the phrase potential regulatory exposure. At 10:41 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was Dana from Internal Compliance, one of the few allies I'd quietly cultivated over the years, not because I needed her, but because I liked knowing someone else read the fine print for fun. They're pulling the logs, she said. Spencer's edits, the exports, everything. Her voice was hushed, not scared, but something close. It's getting ugly. I didn't ask for details, didn't need to. Instead, I opened my laptop and drafted a new email. Legal Department subject, Operational Custody and Access Chains Body. Refer to Section 7.3 Transfer of Operational Custody. No compliant trigger was initiated. No ratification received. No countersignature logged. Attached, screenshots, time-stamps. Vendor contracts referencing ops access restrictions. A redacted version of the original system protocol memo I'd authored in 2018, one that specifically detailed the dual auth requirement and succession triggers. I didn't CC the founder. I didn't CC Spencer. I didn't need to, because by now the system was working exactly as I designed it, airtight when followed and carnivorous when ignored. Legal didn't reply immediately, but I saw the read receipt ping within minutes. Then the file access logs kicked in, board members opening the attachments, someone highlighting sections, someone else clicking into the audit trails. I pictured them hunched over the conference table, eyes widening as they realized the cascade failure wasn't a bug. It was protocol. And the best part? I hadn't broken a single rule, hadn't lifted a finger to sabotage a damn thing. The breach, the scramble, the upcoming regulatory headache, they'd walked into it themselves, paper blindfold tied by arrogance. By noon, Spencer had stopped tweeting. By 1 p.m., Founder's calendar showed a private call scheduled with outside counsel. I sat at my kitchen counter, the afternoon sun creeping across the hardwood, and refreshed my inbox. No new messages, no apologies, but the silence said plenty. And I knew it wouldn't stay quiet much longer. The chairs in the lawyer's conference room were leather, old money kind, silent when you shifted in them, which made the tension worse. No one wanted to be the first to breathe too loud. The kind of silence that prickles your skin because everyone in the room knows something nuclear just got dropped, but no one wants to be the first idiot to poke it with a stick. The firm's outside counsel, a man named Bennett, sat at the head of the table with a hardbound compliance binder open in front of him. He flipped a page with surgical precision, the kind of move that says, I've been waiting to read this out loud since the day you hired me. He adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat, and began. Clause 7.3, Section B, he read, slow and deliberate. Any reassignment of operational authority must be co-signed by the incumbent director and ratified by a majority vote of the board. Absent these conditions, any resultant delegation, access, transaction, or protocol change is considered null and void under internal policy and governance standards. He paused. Let it hang there. Shall I continue? He asked, looking up with that polite menace lawyers do so well. The founder rubbed his temple like the clause itself had punched him in the face. Spencer fidgeted in his seat, eyes darting between the board members like someone about to get voted off an island he didn't even know he was on. Bennett closed the binder. Now then, he said, can someone provide the signed transfer document with both director co-signature and board ratification? Spencer opened his mouth, finally finding some courage or stupidity. I was told I was stepping in. It was kind of understood. Bennett didn't even blink. Understood by whom? The board, Spencer stammered. The COO let out a sharp exhale. No vote was taken. No agenda item was ever submitted. Bennett folded his hands. Then I'll ask again. Do you have a signed transfer document? Silence. The kind that starts as awkward and curdles into dangerous. Spencer looked to his father, who suddenly seemed very interested in the carpet. I assumed, Spencer began. That's the problem, Alan said from across the table. You assumed. Mary never did. Someone shifted in their seat. Leather creaked, the only sound in the room. The CEO, the founder, finally spoke. All right, we'll get the paperwork in order. We can retroactively, you can't, Bennett interrupted, voice low but final. You can vote to authorize moving forward. But everything executed under his access thus far? Legally, it's as if it never happened. And that includes the vendor breach. There it was, not a knife, not a bomb, just truth delivered with the elegance of a gavel drop. Mary wasn't in the room, but her fingerprints were everywhere. Every system still bore her name in its access logs. Every flag, every failure, they all traced back to the moment someone tried to push her out without reading the fine print. She didn't have to lift a finger. The system she built did all the talking. Bennett leaned back in his chair. You'll need to notify compliance and treasury by end of day. And if I were you, I'd prepare statements for any vendors whose contracts might be impacted. Anything Spencer touched, anything altered without a legal transfer of authority, is compromised. Spencer wilted like lettuce in a heat wave. And if someone decides to pursue damages, Bennett added. Almost as an afterthought, Mary's documentation makes her legally bulletproof. No one argued. There was nothing to argue. The COO spoke quietly. We'll need to start identifying rollback points. Someone's going to have to unwind this. No one said the name out loud. They didn't have to, because the woman they dismissed like an obsolete wrench, she had built the entire engine. And now, as it stalled and sputtered and smoked under the weight of their negligence, it realized the awful truth. They didn't know how to fix it, but she did. By the time the founder worked up the nerve to reach out, it was already too late. The fallout from the breach was still rippling, vendors demanding written assurances, Treasury escalating internal inquiries, and compliance firing off audit trail requests like subpoenas at a Senate hearing. Everyone was trying to duct tape a dam they didn't know how to build. So he called me. 4 times in a row. I didn't pick up. The 5th time, I blocked the number. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound like too little, too late, wrapped in we didn't realize and sprinkled with you have to understand. The same corporate hymnal sung whenever the people in charge discover the pipes only worked because someone was under the sink at all hours, tightening bolts and catching leaks with their bare hands. At 3:12 p.m., an email came through. Subject, time to reconnect. Body, hi Mary, given everything happening, I'd like to have a conversation about your possible return. We may have rushed certain steps and your input is more valuable than ever. Let's meet to discuss how you might re-engage with the team and help stabilize things. No apology, no ownership. Just a soft, desperate attempt to wrangle the golden goose back into the henhouse. I stared at it for a full minute, then typed, subject, time to reconnect. Body, I appreciate the outreach. However, I'm currently unavailable for advisory engagements with firms lacking succession compliance structures. Please direct further inquiries to legal. Best of luck. I hit send and closed my laptop with the same finality you use when zipping a suitcase after walking out on a bad relationship. There's no bitterness left, just clarity. And maybe a little bit of champagne in the fridge. What I didn't know. What made the next part all the sweeter was that someone else had been watching all of this very closely. Alan, the COO who'd stayed mostly silent through the disaster, who hadn't joined the panicked chorus trying to undo Spencer's mess with duct tape and crossed fingers. He had seen the writing on the wall earlier than most, knew the difference between a figurehead and a foundation. And sometime between the breach and the lawyer's reading of Clause 7.3, he'd quietly forwarded my resume to a boutique competitor he used to sit on the advisory board for. I found out about it not from him, but from an email that landed the following morning. Subject, exploring opportunities your work precedes you body. Hi Mary, we've been hearing your name a lot these past few weeks, and not just because of the recent headlines. Your system's documentation, process design, and resilience under pressure have been making the rounds in all the right circles. We'd love to bring you in. Not to fix our mess, we're lucky to be stable, but to build something better. On your terms. If you're open to it, lunch is on us. I reread it 3 times. No groveling, no backhanded flattery. Just recognition and respect. Not because I'd burned anything down, but because I didn't. I let them fail on their own. Now the people who mattered could finally see the difference between someone who talked about leadership and someone who just quietly did the damn job. I accepted the invitation for lunch. Told them I'd be available Monday. No rush. I had a weekend off for the first time in years and nothing urgent on my plate, because the house that burned wasn't mine anymore. I'd already moved out and taken the blueprints with me. Monday morning, no alarms, no crisis pings, no 6 a.m. voicemails about printer outages or compliance ghosts haunting the vendor matrix. Just me, dressed in the kind of quiet power outfit that doesn't try too hard but still says, I'm not here to audition. I stepped into the office of Clarity Delta, a boutique ops and systems consultancy that didn't look like a standard-issue cubicle graveyard. No depressing gray walls, no passive-aggressive signs about fridge etiquette. This place had actual sunlight, plants that weren't dying. A couch that said let's solve something, not take a number and cry into your badge. A sharply dressed woman greeted me in the lobby. Mary, she asked like we already knew each other. I'm Eden, CEO's waiting for you upstairs. I nodded and followed her up, noting the open concept space that didn't feel like a startup daycare. No ping-pong tables, no inspirational buzzword murals. Just desks that looked used, focused, alive. And there it was, not a cubicle, a desk, wooden reel with a sleek monitor set up and a printed card that read, Mary Vance Strategic Systems Architect, not consultant, not contractor, not interim architect. The CEO met me with a handshake and a cup of coffee, black, no pretension. His name was Jules, older than I expected, calm energy. a man who didn't need to speak in metaphors to be taken seriously. "We've read your work," he said simply, sliding into the chair across from me. "Vendor chain logic, audit resilient process layers. Your name came up after the Spencer situation exploded. People noticed you didn't go down with the ship. You just let them drown in the mess they made." He smiled, not smugly, but with a kind of quiet recognition. "We don't need keys, we just want your brain." I didn't need a moment to think about it, because in that moment, I realized I wasn't just being offered a new desk or a title. I was being seen. Not for how many emergencies I could juggle or how many holes I could plug with grit and caffeine, but for how I'd built an entire operational fortress that ran so well, no one noticed it until it was gone. I nodded once. "I'm in." Meanwhile, back at the other place, the site of the corporate arson they tried to call agile transition, the mood was less sunlight and more bunker. The board was meeting behind closed doors. Spencer wasn't invited to this one. Alan had convened them quietly, pulling up breach logs, compliance flags, and a list of vendor escalations. Then he asked the question no one wanted to say out loud anymore. What exactly is Spencer's role now? There was no clear answer, because the illusion had cracked. The founder's son, the vision, the future, the golden boy, was officially radioactive. Vendor contracts were being renegotiated. Treasury wanted a third-party audit. Internal whispers of fiduciary negligence floated up through finance. HR's latest pulse survey included the words confidence crisis more than once, so the board voted, unanimous. Spencer's interim authority revoked. His admin access disabled. Founder silently recused. They didn't hold a press release. There were no balloons, no cake. Just a quiet update to the internal org chart. Operations director position vacant. But not for long, because I wasn't coming back. I had already walked into something better, somewhere that didn't need to be convinced of my value after the fact. And this time, I wasn't bringing any keys. The boardroom was packed, not in the sense of physical bodies, though everyone was there, but in the suffocating weight of consequence. You could feel it in the way no one touched their coffee, in the too crisp rustle of a legal binder being opened, in the look Alan gave the founder across the table. Equal parts tired, disappointed, and done. Spencer wasn't present, that was a choice. They didn't need him there for this part. The audit trail already told the story. And the story was ugly. The founder sat stiffly at the head, the same seat he'd reclaimed with theatrical flair just weeks earlier. He still had that old-school air about him, like a man who remembered when handshakes were contracts in succession meant passing down the family toolbox. But this wasn't a garage. This was a company wired together by policies, clauses, and systems smart enough to bark when mishandled. And they'd been barking. Legal counsel Bennett stood at the far end, flipping pages with a kind of restrained exhaustion that said, "I tried to warn you." He paused, lifted his eyes, and looked directly at the founder. "With all due respect," Bennett began, his voice low and tight, "you've stated that Spencer was authorized to act on behalf of operations during the transition." The founder nodded. "That's correct. He was being prepped to take over. He was given access and oversight with the expectation of Mary's exit. And who formalized that transfer?" The founder opened his mouth to respond, but Bennett cut in. "No, let me rephrase." He closed the binder slowly, deliberately. "Who authorized the transfer? Legally. For Clause 7.3, with co-signature and board ratification." Silence, a long, agonizing silence. The founder looked around the table, expecting support, maybe a lifeline, but there were no allies left, just board members looking back with expressions that ranged from grim to furious. Alan finally spoke, voice like a gavel. "No one, not legally." A few heads dropped. Someone swore under their breath. Dana from compliance let out a shaky exhale. Bennett nodded once and turned toward the whiteboard. He picked up a marker and wrote 3 words in thick black ink: void, exposure, liability. He underlined the last one. Then came the sigh, heavy, reluctant. It came from Malcolm, a board member who rarely spoke but whose vote always meant the tide was turning. "Undo it," Malcolm said. "Rebuild the controls. And for God's sake, find someone who understands the system this time." No one argued, because the truth wasn't debatable. You can't run a machine by shoving a silver spoon into the control panel and hoping for the best. Meanwhile, across town, I sat in the sunlit office of Clarity Delta, my new desk already broken in with notepads, a backup charger, and a small succulent named Audit. My inbox was open, and the thank you notes were pouring in. "Mary, I didn't realize how much we relied on you until this month. I'm sorry for how it ended. Truly. Vendor Services is rebuilding from scratch. If you ever feel like consulting again, we'd fight for the budget. I've started copying your old templates. You made it look easy. It's not." I didn't gloat, didn't screenshot and forward, didn't type a single "I told you so." Instead, I closed the email tab, leaned back, and took a deep breath. Because this was the victory I'd been building all along, not in noise or drama, but in knowing that systems remember who built them. And sometimes, the loudest statement you can make is leaving. Thanks for watching, you cubicle warriors. Hit that subscribe button. Unless you're my old boss, then you're on your own. Revenge of the coffee pot strikes again.